Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you, of course, by the world-famous FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuce 85, and I'll have to apologize for my background. It isn't quite there yet. I've been moved into the new place for just under maybe three and a half weeks or so. Still unloading some boxes, man. Moving is rough. I haven't been moved in many, many years, and I got to tell you, moving is rough. Don't recommend it. So I don't have the background I want. I got a chair. I'd show it to you guys, but I got it. So I got my old chair, the squeaky one, replaced. You won't hear that obnoxious noise anymore. We got that under control. Still deciding if I want to do the garage thing or if I want to set up my little, area here. We've got this large dining/living area. So we'll see. I've got some ideas, still trying to do my thing. I'll make sure before the CFB season starts that I have a suitable background, complete with my posh Alexander St. John's jersey, the gift from a man, Mike C., complete with the Dylan Dessou jersey, the Texas jersey, the man that won me the $10,000 during the tournament, of course. And of course, we'll have some other goodies. Looking at the Bear Brick stuff. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bear Bricks, but I used to be into the Supreme and the Jordan and the Bape and all that stuff and the Yeezys, and I still am. But with kids, that stuff doesn't really happen too much for me. But I am looking at getting some Bear Bricks. I'm kind of excited for that. They're expensive as hell, though, let me tell you. Here doing the off-season show, I got a pretty positive response last week. I know a lot of you, and I am okay with it. I am not offended by it. I totally understand it. A lot of you, you're interested in the betting and the DFS and the fantasy side, and that's your thing. And you're off to the next sport and you're doing your thing there. And I understand that. If you're not interested in off-season college basketball talk, it's totally okay. If you are into it and you're here and you're supporting the show, let me just tell you, I greatly appreciate it. Like, even if you tune in, you drop a like, you say hello, and then you bolt out of here, like, that's enough for me. I'd love you to watch the entire show and listen to what I have to say and my thoughts on the portal. But any and all support that you guys give me, retweets, likes, all that stuff, it helps me so much. The FTN Network has been phenomenal to me. My man Quan, the many producers, the editors, Mike Randall, Chris Meany, like, we have just such a phenomenal team. And the fact that they allow me to come on the FTN Network once a week and just yammer on about college basketball, despite the fact that we're heading into the month of May, in which John Rothstein, aka Rothbot, says we sleep in May. We don't truly sleep in May. The transfer portal is going crazy. We got the coaching changes all done up. Lots of stuff happening. I want to talk about it. I'm tweeting about it all the time. I'm talking about it in DMs to people all the time. Like, I absolutely love the transfer portal. I truly in my heart of hearts thinks that us talking about this stuff, processing it, is going to help us. I know the next, we're looking at, college basketball not starting till mid to late November, right? We've got May, we've got June, we've got July, August, September, October. We've got about a half year. We're a half year away from the next season. We're going to have WNBA to placate us. We're going to have college football, which can't wait for it. I'm going to talk about a lot starting in mid to late July. But talking about this stuff, processing it, internalizing it, and learning these roster moves, these teams, how it's going to affect DFS, betting, all of that stuff is only going to help you. Instead of having to do the crash course in November, because a lot of you guys that watch me do NFL, right? You guys are going to be doing the NFL thing. We got college football bleeding into the college basketball season. There's MLB wrapping up. NBA is getting ready to gear up. There is a ton of stuff happening. And you having to crash course college basketball and get ready for the season there in just a couple of days or a week or whatever, it's going to be tough. So if you follow me now, you have that information. I know a lot of you are going to say, well, I lean on you for that. And I'm cool with that too. Lean on me for that. But not only doing these shows and giving that info, is it a help to you guys? At least I think it is. It's a big help for me because it allows me to really get on top of this, do the research, look at this, read the articles, watch the shows, talk to people in the industry. I reach out to a bunch of the guys. I'm Tobias Bass, a really, really smart guy that breaks portal breaking news and recruiting news all the time. Like, that dude is amazing. He's awesome. I try not to bother him, but sometimes I get into his ear and try to get some news from him. But, just talking to people like that and trying to continue to build the brand for the CBB Super Show / CFB Super Show, and just continue to do our thing and continue to just ride this momentum. So that's my soapbox spiel here, why I'm going to continue to do the off-season stuff. I love it. I love it. So we're focused on transfer portals. We're going to talk about the transfers a lot. There is so much happening now. You might feel like your team hasn't done a lot. If you're a fan of like Arizona or something like that, you might feel like, we haven't done anything. What's happening? There's no good names left. What are we going to do? There are still plenty of players left in the portal. In fact, there's over 1,500. Let's get that straight. But also there are players who haven't hit the portal yet that still are. And there were a few today that hit the portal that people were like, wow, that's a relatively big name. There's still people out there, hitting that portal and transferring and deciding. We saw Ray J. Dennis, the grad transfer from Toledo, hit. Even though it sounds like he's going to go right into Illinois. We'll talk about that in a second. Tanner Holden, who was such a stud at Wright State, didn't work out at Ohio State. He hit the portal today. There's just continually everyday players adequate to borderline semi-elite players hitting the portal each and every day. So there's still going to be players throughout. But also, as you have the draft stuff going on, guys have declared but retained their eligibility. They're getting notes. They're getting told what they need to work on. The players that don't get invited to the G League camp, those guys are going to come back first. Those will be the ones that pull out of the draft. They go back into college. A lot of them, there is a portal deadline. So a lot of them will have entered the draft and it gets lost in the shuffle, but they entered the draft and also entered the portal. So they're sitting there maintaining college eligibility. They're sitting in the draft, they're getting notes, and then they jump back at the collegiate level, but they're already in the portal. So they don't miss that deadline, but they pull out of the draft before that deadline passes as well. Multiple deadlines happening, a lot of moving pieces here, right? So that'll be another group of players that are being active in the portal. And then you'll see guys who didn't hit the portal, declared, last minute decide that they're going to come back to the collegiate level as well, and they hit the portal. And there's going to be a lot of big names still to come that hit the portal and are going to really shape the atmosphere and college basketball itself. Plenty of guys that are going to be out there. So you really, really need to be aware of that. And just know that if your team hasn't done a lot yet, there's still going to be plenty of moves to happen. So don't feel dejected just yet. Of course, I say that as a Washington Huskies fan. If they were in a position where they had made 0 moves, I would be really, really sad probably, but I'm really happy that they've been very active, and we're going to talk about that in a second too. Shout out to Arizona, though. I'm using them as a team that's not been active in the portal. However, they have been active. They just whiffed a bunch. But their 2024 class is shaping up to be great in the recruiting side of things. Can't forget, still build a team via recruiting, right? They do land the top small forward, or one of the top small forwards in the country in the 2024 class, by the name of Carter Bryant. They were battling Louisville for that one. Louisville is a big-time loser so far in the portal. They whiff on a top recruit there in Carter Bryant. Very smart decision, I think, by him to go to Arizona over Louisville. A lot more structure there. Arizona is just a team that is going to be able to bounce back When I say bounce back, it's not like they had a bad season. Some Arizona fans are talking crazy about Tommy Lloyd. It's like, come on, man. Things could be so much worse for y'all. Just because you haven't made the moves that you want to make doesn't mean you won't get guys. There's still, like I said, I want to harp on this point, a ton of players that are available. Let me pull up the NBA draft list here. Last week we had some really good conversations. A lot of people hit me up before, after, and during the show. So if you guys are interested in, or you're here live, feel free to talk with me in the chat, or you can hit me on the Twitter machine or on demand when you're watching in the comment section. I circle back around and also check that out as well. So I want to pull up real quick to kind of harp on the early entrant list, where some of those guys are going to come back to the collegiate level and possibly even transfer. There is a list that came out earlier this morning. NBA announced their initial early entrant list for the 2023 draft. Now, the early entrant list is currently, just to really let this sink in for you about how this player pool is going to really still push the portal to levels we've probably never seen. There are 242 early entrants on the list. Now, in 2021, it was 353. So that was even larger. And that, every time something like this happens, there's a doom and gloom. People in the industry, oh my God, college basketball is over. CBB's over. Transfer portal has ruined college basketball. People used to say that about the one and dones. Oh my God, one and dones. There's going to be no hope for college basketball to last. Nobody's going to support their teams. They can't get into the roster. Blah, 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 blah. One and done phase came and gone. One and done still happened, but teams aren't fully built like that, like a couple of years ago, like they were. And guess what? College basketball survived. Now we're in the transfer portal. We're doing the COVID year, which in 2 years, the COVID year will fall off and you won't have as many transfers. I promise you won't have as many transfers. And college basketball will not die. But the doom and gloom, oh my gosh, we can't, have this keep happening. The casual fan, they can't get behind the team. They don't know who's on the team. Last I checked, man, people cheered for their collegiate favorite team, unlike the professional level, which even me, I'm cheering for the name on the front. And that doesn't matter if it's the pro level or the collegiate level for me, but it's more so true at the collegiate level. People are cheering for the university that they went to, or they're cheering for the team that they like, or for, like in my case, I didn't go to Washington, but I grew up around that area. I went to a lot of their games with my dad growing up. RIP to him. And that's just the team that I associate with. That's my hometown team. I care about what the jersey on the front. Like, yeah, I want them to get players. Personally, I'm in a spot where I don't care if a guy, I want, Keon Brooks coming back. That's awesome. I want guys to stay if they want to stay. But I'm just as happy to get Severe Wheeler, Moses Wood, these 1 year grads or rentals, whatever you want to call them. I'm super happy for that. As long as we're a winning program and the jersey name on the front remains Washington, I'm happy. So I just want to put that out there. The college basketball doom and gloom crowd, it's not going to end. Ratings aren't going to suffer terribly. Casual fans are still going to come around, and and it's not. I don't even know why we're worried about casual fans, anyways. They're not the ones watching in mid to late November. They're not coming on board until after Christmas usually, and then you're not getting the full casual experience until conference tournaments are rolling around. March Madness, of course, they're going to show up. It doesn't matter if the Duke Blue Devils have Zion Williamson, or they have that white kid in the high school video that's all of 4 foot tall guarding Zion Williamson. It doesn't matter who is actually technically playing, because people are still going to care about the experience, the tournament, the teams. They're going to watch no matter what. Yeah, maybe ratings were down 5% this year. Maybe they were down a little bit, whatever. I don't think that college basketball is ever going to end the way that people talk. We're going to go through some ups and downs. The COVID year is going to drop, like I said, in 2 years. The transfer portal stuff is going to slow down significantly. Let's get into the next topic here about waivers. This is also going to, you'll see next year, I think we'll see a lot of slowing down with transfers as well, especially for undergrads. And a lot is going to determine the first waiver that happens for an undergrad. So if you're a first time, so basically the way that it works now is if you're a grad transfer, and this is how it's always been, you don't have to sit out, you don't have to get a waiver. If you've graduated college, you go into a grad program, you're immediately eligible to play. That's been the case for a long time, right? So we're all good there. We all understand that. If you're a first-time transfer, this is the newer thing. If you're a first-time transfer, no waiver required, no reason. You don't like your coach, you don't get playing time, you just want to move back home, you've got some issues, whatever it is. You're able to do that without a waiver, immediately good to go. And there are plenty of those this year. Next show, I'm going to have an actual list. It takes some work because the COVID year, the grad year, all this stuff, it's a little confusing to know who requires a waiver and who doesn't. I am working on a list that is constantly growing. And on one of the upcoming shows in the next couple of weeks, I'm actually going to go through that list so that we have a clear picture of who is actually ready to play, going to play right now, and who do we have to monitor that is going to need a waiver. Now, if you are an undergrad, meaning you're not a grad transfer, you haven't gone to college for 4 years, you're a COVID freshman, sophomore, junior, COVID senior perhaps, but you're not a grad, you are transferring, you're required a waiver if you have transferred already. Examples include my man Jalen Cook, one of my favorite players at the collegiate level. He's up there with Cam Thomas, Bryce Cotton, right? These are guys that I just idolized and just never fade. Those are my dudes in college, right? There's been a couple others, of course, but we don't need to get into all that right now. Jalen Cook, Tulane stud, started his career at LSU. Now he is going back to LSU, but he will require a waiver. There's no way around it. Another guy that will require a waiver, and because this is his third time transferring, he's going to go to Ole Miss and play for Chris Beard out there, is Brandon Murray. Speaking of LSU, he started his career with LSU, transfers to Georgetown, gets the free waiver, decides to leave Georgetown with Pat Ewing gone, and has decided to go play for Chris Beard in Ole Miss. He is only going to technically be a COVID sophomore / real junior. He will require a waiver. That's the way it is for him. Primo Spears, another guy from Georgetown transferring, started his career with Duquesne's. Now he's a COVID sophomore / real junior. We don't know where he's headed yet. He did have a visit with Kansas today that was very positive. Sounds like they have a very good chance of landing him. That would be super sick, especially if they get Hunter Dickinson. Kansas might be a reloaded team looking at a Final Four, or bust type of year if they get Hunter Dickinson and Primo Spears. But Spears will require a waiver. Those are the three primary ones. There are a few others. Now, reasons for a waiver: no longer allowed to use a coaching change or, some sort of problems. You get to use a mental health. So, I don't need to get into mental health. I'm not a doctor, but at this point, you guys know what that means. You've got, something going on, right? There's a lot of pressure. You've got some stuff. You're got to have a counselor, whatever. You've got issues there. Or a family member death or seriously sick, ill, whatever. Now, I watched the Field of 68 podcast this morning with Jeff Goodman and Robbie Hummel, and they brought up some good points. I don't want to carbon copy what they said, but they definitely brought up some good points. And I've already been thinking about this, but they said it. They said what I'd already been thinking, and this is that the waiver process is going to get very, very tricky here because NCAA has to be really careful. Death in the family or somebody sick, that kind of goes without saying. I don't know that somebody would use that as a way to get a waiver, even if it's not true. I mean, that could definitely happen. It's a pretty shoddy thing to do. What I think more so is going to happen is the mental health avenue, where you got a family friend who's a doctor. They're going to, start seeing you as a patient. Then you are able to use a write-up, a document. They put together a document, or Goodman brought it up. What's going to stop somebody from using that doctor or family friend from backdating some documents that say, yes, they've been coming to see me. But we've been, for the past year and a half, they've been a patient of mine. They do have this diagnosis. They're depressed. They've got this, and this, that and the other. Please go ahead and, blah, 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 whatever it is. They take that to the NCAA. Hey, I got a mental health issue. I need a waiver so I can go play here. Boom, done. Now, if the NCAA makes a mistake with this and they give a waiver for a very, not mysterious, but a lackluster reason, or just kind of a, one that doesn't seem honest, it's going to open them up to a world of pain, because they're going to have to set a precedent here. And I shouldn't kid myself, because there's nothing that has made the NCAA in the past for rhyme or reason give a waiver. They'll give a waiver to one guy for one reason and then decline a waiver for one guy for another reason. This was before the free transfer year. Like there was no figuring it out. So there probably won't be any figuring it out this time either. But I do think they open themselves up to some trouble if they do give somebody a waiver for quote unquote mental health and turn around and decline somebody else for the same reason, because it's a slippery slope and it's a lot different than, oh, I got a coaching change. Oh, well, your coaching change doesn't warrant a waiver. Your coaching change does. Like, you can get away with that, saying, hey, you got mental health pretty bad, we'll give you a waiver. But, your mental health, it's just kind of, below average. You don't deserve a waiver. That could really open them up to some possible lawsuits. That could open them up to some bad publicity. There is so many things that could happen there. So I am keeping a very close ear to the street. I'm all over. I've got all my noties on still for college basketball stuff, because I don't want to miss the first waiver given to one of those guys. I have in my the Jalen Cook, Brandon Murray. I have those names in the deck there ready to go, so that I don't miss when one of them gets a waiver or decline, because a lot is going to be said about that first one. That first domino that falls for a waiver is going to tell us a lot. Is the NCAA going to be very strict, or are they just going to give everybody a waiver? I know that a lot of people think that they should not give waivers for non-grad second to third time transfers. And I know a few people that think they should get waivers or should just be allowed to play. I personally think they should be allowed to play, because, again, after 2 years, when the COVID year falls off, I don't particularly think we're going to have such a huge problem with transferring. It's just not going to be an issue, because what's happening here is guys are taking their extra COVID year. They've played 4 years in college. Hey, I can go ahead and put my name in the portal. If a team comes calling that I like, I can take that gig. If, no programs come to me that I like, then I start the next chapter of my career, whether that's the G League, overseas, professional basketball, or going pro in something other than sports, right? So I think once that falls off, we'll see a fraction of the number of the transfers that we are seeing. But again, I am very curious to see how this waiver process happens. Anyways, 242 players, early entrants. May 31st is what the first of two deadlines. June 12th is the second deadline. That is to withdraw your name from the draft pool. Still probably going to see, 60 plus stay in the draft. It's always a head scratcher. We don't need to get into draft talk here necessarily, but some guys where you're like, man, you're projecting to be a mid to late second rounder. Why did you stay in? There's 60 of you, plus there are overseas guys and guys without college eligibility anymore. Like, what's going on here? And especially now with NIL, like, why on earth? It's not for me to say what a guy will do and why he should do it. For me, I would never leave college for a second round grade if I have NIL, and especially if it's a situation like a Hunter Dickinson. Like, he would be silly, right, to go to the NBA, because he's probably not going to get drafted in the first round right now. But if he goes back to college, which he is, and he transfers in the right spot, which he probably will, like a Kansas, it's not only going to be the big man on campus again, ladies, food, whatever, cars, all that stuff, but he's going to get paid a very handsome amount, probably in the millions. Would he get that in the NBA as a second rounder? Hell no. So it's just doesn't even make sense to stay in the draft if you're a fringe guy. If you got a first round grade, guaranteed contract, and you're going to, regardless of playing time, you get into that first round, like, sure, Fringe first round is even okay because of the G League 2A contracts and stuff. But man, with NIL, you got to stay around. So important dates coming up that we'll want to track. The deadline was April 23rd for early entrants to declare for the NBA draft. So there's no more of that going on. So that's why we have the list that we have. May 13th and 14th will be the NBA G League camp. That is where they'll invite, kind of fringe prospects, guys like, Lofton last year. They will then take the top, I believe, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. I know I just gave you a lot of numbers. I think it's like 5 from the G League to the NBA draft combine, which is where the higher level prospects have been invited to, and then they'll work their way through that process. So the 13th to 14th, the G League camp, we'll be definitely paying attention to that. And then on the 15th of May through the 21st will be the actual NBA draft combine. We'll see the NBA draft lottery on May 16th. And then the important date of May 31st, which is the last day for early entrants to withdraw from the NBA while retaining their NCAA eligibility. Gets a little tricky here because there are 2 deadlines. June 12th is the deadline for early entrants remaining. That's the international players, guys who maybe are in the, the G League Ignite or NBL. What's that other one? Overtime Elite, right? Those things. But if you want to retain your NCAA eligibility, May 31st is the date to do so. There are sometimes exceptions, but that's the date that if you're planning to go back to college, you need to pull out by. So May is going to be jam-packed, and you're going to see some guys, some pretty well-known guys who either, fizzle out at the G League camp, or they get invited to the NBA draft combine, don't make a splash there. Maybe they don't get a first-round grade. They decide to come back May 31st. Boom, all of a sudden the portal has, 25 to 30 additional guys bouncing into it. Again, don't be alarmed if your team hasn't been that active in the portal. Still plenty of guys who are going to be coming into it. So that is the important dates here coming up in May. All right. So let's get into what's happened the last week since I talked to you guys last. Some of the notable, I guess, transfers. We'll start with, and I really want to get into mid-majors tonight. This is a show I want to dedicate to mid-majors, and I don't want it to be super terribly long. We'll talk for another 30, 45 minutes, see how it goes. Noah Reynolds transfers from Wyoming to Wisconsin. Then he reneges on the Wisconsin deal because his brother is an assistant coach at UWGB, and that's, of course, Green Bay. Yesterday, Reynolds decides to go to UWGB. He will be a much bigger piece there than he would have been at Wisconsin, and he gets to play under his brother. So a cool story there for Noah Reynolds. But sticking with Wisconsin, Jordan Davis, who is not the level of his brother, I'd say, right, who has made the NBA, transferred out of Wisconsin, will be going to Illinois State. And how do you feel if you're Jordan Davis? Do you feel like, I'm proud of my brother, like he's in the NBA, it's great, like that's probably the exterior, but on the interior, are you kind of like, man, my brother, he crushed it at Wisconsin when it was his turn. It's my turn this past season. I was a role player. I lost my starting spot to Connor Estjen. What am I doing? Now I'm going to go to Illinois State. Like, damn. However, still playing D1. He goes to a program in Illinois State that needs guys that can play. I think it's a great opportunity for Jordan to kind of prove his worth and possibly even work his way back. We see this with guys. They go down to low to mid majors, crush it, and then come back to the P5 level. So maybe Jordan does that. He does technically have a COVID year to use, so he would be eligible to do so as a grad. And we'll see if that happens for him. But I wish him all the best there at Illinois State. That was one that I noticed earlier when I was doing my notes. A couple of other ones to mention that happened today, and then we'll get into the mid-major stuff I want to talk about. Tyreek Smith of Oklahoma State going to SMU. I think that's pretty interesting. Rebounding defensive guy. Puff Johnson, who Butler was very heavy on. A lot of Butler guys thought they had Puff Johnson racked up. I think that Puff Johnson, as intriguing of a prospect he is, offensively, there's not going to be a lot to be added there. So it wasn't like he was going to add that much to Butler. Did decide to go to Penn State. So Penn State does get Puff Johnson, which I think he's going to have the opportunity to be a really strong peripherals guy. I'm still not so sure about his actual scoring there. But I think he's going to be a good source of rebounds, stocks, possibly assists. I like the opportunity there for him. Type of guy where it's like we get him at 4.7 to 5.5, something like that. I think he's going to be a really solid play. If he balloons up to like a 7K price because he came from North Carolina and that's what DK does, he's an easy fade, but we'll see. UTSA, the Roadrunners there, moving from the CUSA to the AAC. They get their guy back from Pacific, Jordan Ivy Curry, who became a very solid scorer in the WCC this year. Going back, there are several teams heading to the AAC. A little bit of changes. We'll get into that deeper into the summer when we talk about previews for the year. My Washington Huskies. Let's talk about your world famous America's team. Let's face it, Washington Huskies, who have done fairly well. Considering the fact that we lost Jackson Grant, Tyler Linhart, obviously not two, guys who played very many minutes. Langston Wilson, who is a JUCO stud, didn't get a lot of minutes for us. Cole Badgema, all these guys just heading out the door. 6-7 guys. PJ Fuller's gone. Keon Minifield is gone. That was a tough one, to take. I know he's headed to Arkansas, but for me, it was important to keep Corin Johnson, which we did. I think I'm going to sound like a hater here, and I don't intend to. I really don't intend to. Keon Minifield is great, but to me, he's a volume scorer. Volume scorers are something that you can find. You can go out and get yourself a volume scorer in a myriad of places. Now, some are better than others, obviously. But I think at the end of the day, Menifield's a very solid volume scorer, and he's going to be able to compete at the SEC level. No doubt about it. To me, Corin Johnson was the important one to stay. I think that he has an opportunity to be a program all-timer, especially if he stays for like 2 more seasons as opposed to just 1, especially if he stays for 3. I think he has the ability to be like an Andrew Andrews type times a million, like a Will Conroy, Andrew Andrews morph with Andrew scoring, Conroy's, decision-making. I think he's going to be really, really good. I'm excited about year 2, Corin Johnson. I'm absolutely giddy about his return. Now, the Huskies, when we talked about it last time, they had signed the kid out of Texas, Wesley Yates, really highly ranked recruit, feeling great about him. Christian King was one of the top players in the Seattle/Washington State area. Those 2 guys coming in. Again, we lost quite a bit to the portal, but returning Braxton Mia, Frank Kepnong, Samuel Uribe, who is an NBA Academy kid, hasn't played a whole lot, but I think we'll see him a little bit more this year. My man, Corin Johnson. Those were the primary pieces. Noah Williams decided he wanted to transfer out because of injuries, and just the opportunity wasn't there for him. I no hate towards Noah Williams. It just wasn't a fit. I thought it might be. Injuries and everything else, he just has not returned to the sophomore level that he was before. Now, the big news, in addition to Corin, Mia, and Kepnong coming back, and Uribe, was the fact that Keon Brooks decided to return as well for his final collegiate season. Massive. Without Keon Brooks, we're probably a middling team. The Pac-12 is going to be, I think, significantly weaker if it can get any weaker, right? Pac-12 has already been one of the weaker P5s. But there are teams absolutely ravaged in the Pac-12. UCLA has lost a ton and still might lose even more with Tiger Campbell flirting with the draft / possibly transferring if he returns. Amari Bailey is one we have to keep a close eye on. There is a ton of movement here in the Pac-12, and I think the Huskies actually end up having one of the top 4, maybe 5 rosters in the conference, which I'm really excited about. So those guys all coming back. We hit the portal early with Moses Wood, who is a stretch 4 from Portland. He played a little bit at Tulane, played a little bit at UNLV. He can shoot the rock. Great role player that is going to do damage. The 3-point shooting of the Huskies was very suspect. Trading Wood basically Badgema out the door for Moses Wood is an upgrade, most definitely. Then we bring in Anthony Holland, role player from Fresno State, who can play really solid defense. He can handle the rock a little bit. He has those intangibles, if you will. Definitely a solid addition there to the roster. Somebody that I think will play big minutes. And then it was just we got to get a point guard to tie this together. Like, this roster we have right now is looking to me solid. Like a Corin Johnson, Keon Brooks, Frank Kepnong, Moses Wood, and then off the bench, you got the Yates King combo, the youngsters, and then probably Braxton Mia. Although Kepnong coming back from injury, maybe Mia starts at center first. That's a solid group, but we're missing a point guard there, and we had to go get one. I thought maybe we get Taron Armstrong. It sounds like he might go pro now. Gonzaga was in on him. We lost out, and we were in on him early and dropped out very, very late in the process there. But then we got a crystal ball on several sites for Severe Wheeler. It's been about 2.5 weeks. I've been sitting here wondering, like, why is it taking so long? Is Georgia going to make a last-minute effort? Like, is Severe Wheeler going to go back to Georgia? All I've heard the last 2 weeks on boards is, Severe Wheeler's, he's waffling on Washington. He's going to go back to Georgia. You guys are going to lose him. And it's like, damn, please don't gut me like this. And sure enough, this morning / late afternoon, whatever, Severe Wheeler decides to come to Washington. The pipeline from Kentucky to Washington remains open. We have gotten Keon Brooks, Quade Green, Severe Wheeler. Keep the Kentucky kids coming. We'll take them to Washington. I absolutely love it. Severe Wheeler dealt with injuries, dealt with some offensive issues. He was in a very high-pressure situation at Kentucky. He won't be under the microscope as much here at Washington. It'll be a little bit similar to the Georgia when he was there. He'll be able to just play basketball. And he doesn't require shots to do his thing. Elite passer, elite assist rate, can defend well. Is going to spearhead this offense. Will be in a backcourt with Corin Johnson and Wesley Yates at times. And then, like I said, Anthony Holland, coming off the bench. But suddenly we're looking at a probable starting five of Severe Wheeler, Corin Johnson, Keon Brooks, Moses Wood, and Braxton Mia and or Frank Kepnong. Like, tell me that five does not compete for a top 4 spot in the Pac-12, possibly, if things break right and we get a few other role players here and some few solid pieces, being a Pac-12 tournament winner, contender, or a Pac-12 regular season conference winner. We got to be playing in the postseason. This is it for Coach Hopkins. The seat will never be hotter than it is right now. He has failed with better talent than what we have on this roster, but I will say the amount of experience on this roster, the continuity that's returning, and the talent that we have, this can't be a fail. This has to be a postseason appearance. I mean, it's got to be an NCAA tournament appearance, but I'm less apt to be like, get out if we make the NIT. If we make the NIT and we make like a deep run in the NIT, I think that, for me, that cools the flames a little bit. I know a lot of other people will be like, fuck that, get rid of them. But an NCAA tournament appearance would be much better. Now, if we make no postseason at all, and I can't be okay with – I would have been okay with the CBI this year. I can't be okay with CBI next year with this roster. If he makes no postseason at all, then it's a get-out situation. It's just gone. Syracuse needed a coach. Hopkins could have, if he had done well with Washington, he probably would have gotten offered the Syracuse job. He's done horrible for Washington. No Syracuse job for him. Gotta get back to winning. Gotta prove you can win without Lorenzo Romars. Guys, this is the roster to do it. Washington Huskies, buy in. Let's go. Let's win the Pac-12, everybody. Let's win the Pac-12. Please, let's win the Pac-12. So I'm excited about this team. I got to tell you. They are definitely looking good. All right, so backtracking a little bit to the early entrant before we get into the mid-majors, let me just read off the early entrant list to you guys so you have an idea of what kind of names may be popping up here. And I'll kind of say some of them. I'll give my opinion on – I'm not going to read all, like, a million of them, but the top ones. And I'll give my opinion on if I think they're going to come back or not. So Amari Bailey, it's 50-50 right now if he comes back. I personally think the correct decision is for him to come back, because if he does, he's a surefire lottery pick. Like, in my mind, it's a guarantee. He absolutely takes UCLA to the tournament. He becomes a probable one-man show on the perimeter and averages over 20 points per game, which is hard to do in the P5 level because of how balanced rosters are. It sounds like majority of people think he's going to stay in the draft. If he gets a first-round grade, then he's gone, and UCLA is crippled. But I really like Amari Bailey, and I think it's 50-50 right now. Anthony Black of Arkansas, he's gone, won't be back. Kobe Buffkin of Michigan, gone, won't be back. Jalen Clark, another UCLA player, that one to me is gone, not coming back. I think it's really unlikely he returns. There's a chance, but it's doubtful to me. Ricky Council of Arkansas, that one to me is 50-50, but at this point with Arkansas and all the portal additions they've made, he's probably gone. Noah Clowney of Alabama, he's going to be one of those guys like didn't do a lot in college, but probably going to be a really solid NBA guy. He's gone. Grady Dick, he's gone. Wendell Green, I think he's probably gone. Jordan Hawkins is surely gone because he won a title. What more should he do? Taylor Hendricks of UCF, he's going to be a really good NBA player. He won't be back. He's getting lotto talk already. It's a damn shame that we didn't get him for more than 1 year. And Jalen Hood-Schifino of Indiana, he's definitely gone as well. Then you have some fringe players. There are a few others that are definitely gone. Go through those real quickly as well. Gigi Jackson, I love him. Wish he'd be back. No chance. Colby Jones, Maxwell Lewis of Pepperdine. He's really good. He won't be back. Brandon Miller, obviously he's gone. Mike Miles is not going to return. That's why TCU's been loading up on guards. Chris Murray, Nick Smith, Turk Smith, Jarris Walker, and Kaysen Wallace. Those are all guys I believe to be gone. Julian Strother of Gonzaga, I think coming into it, I thought it was 50-50 he'd be back. I'm now leaning towards him not returning. Jet Howard, definitely gone. And then Key George of Baylor, definitely gone. Now, I am seeing Alex Fudge on a few lists here of being definitely gone. He's so athletic and so good, but still so raw. If he can rope a team into drafting him and developing him, you know, kind of like a mid to late first round where he can just be in the G League and develop and make mistakes, then it makes sense for him to go. I think if he returns for another collegiate season, he's doing himself a big service and getting the opportunity to showcase his talents and really show that his offensive game isn't like so raw that he can actually contribute on that end. So I am definitely hoping he returns, but it seems to me a lot of the draft experts believe Alex Fudge won't return. Other guys, Cam Whitmore, clearly gone. Jalen Wilson, definitely gone. And Derek Whitehead, who I'm 50-50 on. Guys who are in the draft, but I personally think are leaning towards returning, not because of any inside info, just it would make the most sense. Jaden Akins of Michigan State, he should come back. I actually went to the DK Sportsbook and got myself a future early. I need to put it in the tracker, but I have a Michigan State future to the Final Four. They're offering just Final Four futures, obviously champions too, but Michigan State to the Final Four I think is an extremely strong bet right now, assuming that the pieces that are on the roster right now and that have declared all return. Jaden Akins, definitely. I did see there was a lot of shock with AJ Hoggard, who kind of almost like secretly declared. I never saw any major announcements there of his declaration, but he is on the early entrant list, which is a bit surprising. They, you know, I would expect him to come back, but the fact that he kind of went a little bit sneaky there, it scares me a bit. But as long as Hoggard's back, man, Michigan State's going to be good. Trey Alexander, TJ Bamba, who has transferred to Nova, Will Baker, who is now, he's been transferring a million times. Josh Bannon, who is a Montana kid. Imani Bates is in there. Don't quite know what's going to happen with Bates. It's so crazy because Bates was looked at as like in high school, in sophomore year of high school, Bates was getting some comparisons to LeBron James. Completely fallen out of there. So I think it's a case of one of those guys who's like super talented in high school. Other guys catch up. We'll see what happens there. Charles Bediako, who I think is probably going to return. We'll see what kind of grade he gets. Jani Broom of Auburn. I think he's just going to get some draft info. I think he'll almost assuredly be back for Auburn. He's going to be really good. Adeem Bana of UCLA. Frankie Collins of ASU. LJ Cryer, who has already transferred. Tristan Da Silva. Devo Davis, who I do think is leaning towards the NBA draft, but it does make sense for him to return. I think he could. Zach Edey of Purdue, of course. Eric Gaines of UAB, and PJ Hall of Clemson. Those are all guys that I think have a pretty fair chance of returning. There are other guys in the early entrant list that I'm kind of just don't have a strong read on, like Andre Jackson of UConn. I don't think anybody would blame him for staying in the draft and just going the professional route after winning a title, but obviously he's one of those guys that I think would probably be, if he comes back to college, Jesus, he's going to be so good. Tyrese Hunter of Texas, Deron Holmes of Dayton, who I think is really good. Dayton has fallen apart. Deron Holmes is one of those guys. If he pulls out of the draft, he's already in the portal. He's going to be a name that teams are clamoring for. He will have any high major team clamoring for his services if he decides to pull out of the draft. So we'll monitor that and see. Guys like Ryan Kalkbrenner are in the draft. I think he would be wise to return. Bobby Klintman of Wake Forest, I think he's almost assuredly coming back. Klintman has got in mock drafts of 2024 a lottery grade. He has so much talent, so much upside, untapped upside. If he has an amazing couple of camps in the draft combine, if he's there, I think he could. There's a chance he goes. We'll see. NBA scouts have fallen completely in love with him. I hope for our sake Klintman comes back, but he is a guy that I'm definitely checking out and wondering on. Tremont Mark, Judah Mintz, Tyron Lawrence, Pele Larson, Dylan Mitchell, Matthew Morrell, and Grant Nelson of North Dakota State. Those are all guys also in the early entrant list that I think have a fair chance of returning. There are several others, but as you get down lower on the list, I mean, Mark Sears, Steele Venters, who transferred to Gonzaga, like those guys are all coming back. So I don't need to go through that with you guys because it's very clearly to me that they're going to come back. The only other guy that's low on draft list that may not is Jordan Walsh of Arkansas. Sounds like he wants to stay in the draft, but I don't know where he stands. And the Arkansas roster has ballooned quickly. So his spot might not be there for him if he waffles too long. All right. Dipping over to the chat, Tony A. Thank you, Tony. He asked, did DePaul do anything? I'm a long-time suffering fan. It's funny you actually mentioned DePaul because they did get somebody within the last 24 hours. And I will tell you about that and we'll kind of talk about them a little bit. But Chico Carter of South Carolina has chosen to transfer to DePaul. So you do have some help here on the way from Chico Carter. He started his career with Murray State, and he then transferred over to South Carolina. So this is his second time transferring. However, the good news is Chico won't require let me just double check that. I'm fairly certain he won't require no, he won't. So he's going to be a grad. So you won't have to get a waiver for Chico. He's good to go. He's going to be playing for DePaul immediately. A little bit of instant offense there. He had a up and down career for South Carolina. He played for Murray State for 2 seasons, South Carolina for 2 years. The last month of the season this year, he was injured. Prior to that, he was basically playing mid-30s as a starter for South Carolina. His last game healthy against Vanderbilt, 15 points in 35 minutes, had a couple of assists, hit 3 triples. Like that's the type of scoring output you can almost, expect from him on a team with other talented options. Like they had Michi Johnson. They also had Gigi Jackson. Now he's going to a DePaul club that isn't going to have a ton of options, right? So this is going to be an opportunity for Chico to really put up some big numbers potentially. When he was at Murray State, his sophomore season, that was the best season of his career. He had a 27% shot rate, 25% usage rate. He shot 42% from long range on 100 attempts, 85% free throw shooter, solid defender, top 10 in the conference for steal rate, top 10 for free throw rate. In the Ohio Valley, he was clearly too talented for that conference, got to go to South Carolina. Things just didn't quite work out there. However, his 3-point shooting, which suffered 2 years ago, when he first came to South Carolina, he dipped to 32%, went back up. He actually was a ridiculously good three-point shooter this year for South Carolina, 49 for 103, 48% from long range on 103 attempts. That was good for 7th best in the nation on a minimum 100 attempts. In conference play, he was second best shooter in the SEC at 44%. So you're looking at a really strong three-point shooter. He has been throughout the course of his career. The first season at South Carolina was more of a blip. I think you're looking at a guy that's going to shoot 40%. Now the Big East is turning into a just juggernaut of a conference, right? We're looking at Providence is still going to be good without Cooley. They've got a really strong roster there that, followed Kimmy English from George Mason. Georgetown's clearly going to be improved under Cooley. Villanova has hit a couple of guys in the portal, which we'll talk about. Xavier has done very well. St. John's has Rick Pitino. I mean, even though they've been lackluster in the portal, they're still going to make some noise. UConn, I already talked about how their class is ridiculous. UConn is going to have a championship window for the next 3 to 5 years, so get used to seeing them in the Elite Eight and beyond. Creighton, knocking on the door of Final Four. It's a little puzzling that they've lost some pieces, but they've also gained some pieces. We'll talk about that. And then the Butler Bulldogs, who are generally looking like they're going to be terrible. Seton Hall, which I don't know, man. Seton Hall, I don't know if they just don't have NIL, but they have done nothing in the portal, and they've lost like 70% of their team. So there are some bad teams. And, of course, Marquette, who is going to be returning a big chunk of their roster as well. So the Big East is a murderer's row of a conference, and then there's a few bottom feeders. Where does DePaul fit into that? I think they're better than Butler. They're probably better at this moment than Seton Hall, believe it or not, because Seton Hall has literally done nothing but watch player after player walk away. And at least DePaul has added a few pieces here. I think the Chico Carter piece, if you remember, Emoja Gibson, Gibson played a little bit out of position there for DePaul, almost out of necessity. We talked about it a lot on slates. He was better as a high caliber role player that could shoot threes. That was Gibson's role. He shot 42% for you guys last year. He was very, very good in that role. And that's going to be the spot that Chico Carter plays, I believe, for this team. Typically an off guard, typically a guy you want shooting the rock, but he's going to have to handle. He's going to have to do a little bit of things there, and he's going to have a high usage rate. So I definitely feel strongly about Chico Carter. Now, you've also added Jaden Henley from Minnesota. Jaden Henley is a guy that, you probably don't know a lot about, or maybe it's Minnesota, right? Who watch Minnesota basketball. Played on a team with Dawson Garcia, Talon Cooper, Jamison Battle. Like, they had guys on their team. Unfortunately, Ben Johnson just hasn't been able to figure it out. It was a bad Minnesota team. But Jaden Henley, as a freshman last year, showed some real flashes of being a good basketball player. Raw, but I mean, you're talking about a guy that can handle the rock a little bit. He shot almost 38% from long range. He's 6'7". He can play a little bit of 2, can play a little bit of 3. Canadian kid, high steal rate, can get after it on the defensive end. He started throughout the first month of the season. Then he got relegated to the bench because once you hit conference play, freshmen sometimes hit a wall. But then he ended the season starting the last 8 to 9 games, and he played pretty well. You look at some of the stat lines that he finished with to end the season against Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament: 14 points, a 1 rebound, 2 assists, and a steal, knocked down a couple of triples. Against Maryland, 14 points, 3 steals, knocked down a couple of triples. Against Iowa, 10 points, 2 steals, 3 assists, 5 rebounds. Like, that kind of stat line is pretty solid for a freshman. He's going to take the next step. I think it's really, really solid. I think that is going overlooked. I think a lot of people are not realizing how good Jaden Henley can actually be. And he's going to make a nice piece there, playing either the 2 or sometimes the 3 there next to Chico Carter. They also get Jeremiah Oden. It was a COVID sophomore, technically a junior, coming over from Wyoming. Oden is definitely a quintessential role player, a hustle guy, if you will. Shoots the 3 a little bit, 34% from long range. His shot rate went up this past season. Obviously, Wyoming, they suffered so many injuries. Losing EK early was not great. They got all those Pac-12 guys in, Jake Kyman, Max Ogbenpaulo, Ethan Anderson. None of them did a damn thing. They all just were trash. Noah Reynolds got hurt. He's got like 100 Maldonado, basically had to do everything. This necessitated Jeremiah Odin to take more shots. And you look at his career trajectory. Freshman, 18% shot rate. Junior or sophomore, 16% shot rate. And then last year, he shot up as a 24% shot rate, which was actually top 20 in the Mountain West Conference. And his three-point percentage went up significantly as well, shooting almost 37% in conference games. So what DePaul has been able to do, Tony, is bring in some shooting and been able to add some guys who can score the rock, because the Big East defense is going to be brutal. There's going to be a lot of good defensive teams, but at the end of the day, you still have to score the ball. As John Madden says, all you got to do is score more than your opponent, and you're typically going to be pretty well off. They bring in those three shooters, and I think all of those guys are going to be big-time contributors for them. Deshaun Nelson, who flirted with the portal, I believe he is coming back as well. That's great news. He had really shown off a lot of ability last year. Excited to see what he's able to do in his second year there. Jalen Terry, Zion Cruz. There's some names coming in here. The Zion Cruz edition, should have been bigger. Expect him to play a lot more. As a true freshman, he was pretty raw. I think you see him play a lot more and really contribute here. The roster is not looking that bad, really. It really is not. Between Odin, Carter, Henley, year two Cruz, and Deshaun Nelson, things look nice. You probably need to add an additional big there somewhere along the line. The unfortunate thing is the portal's flush with guards, not so much on bigs, so I don't know where that would come from just yet. But at the same time, they could probably get away with playing some small ball, because I know a lot of teams are. However, you play a team like St. John's, who's going to feature Joel Soriano a lot, they would have no answer for a player like that. But it's not doom and gloom for y'all. You also got a JUCO kid coming in by the name of Key Young. He is a really solid player as well. So they've done some nice things there at DePaul. Keon, let me pull up Key Young. Triton College is where he played. 31% three-point shooter, not great. Average about 5 rebounds, about 11 points per game. But just a solid guy for them, kind of a tweener, 2-3 type of guy who can definitely give them solid minutes and defends a little bit. So you guys have definitely done some work. You've done a hell of a lot more in Seton Hall, which is they've done nothing. You've done a hell of a lot more than Arizona, which they've just added to their class of 2024. So believe it or not, DePaul is not a loser in the transfer portal. I want to get to the mid-major here, but just real quick, sticking with the Big East, going to Seton Hall, they are in trouble, right? They've lost a lot. Kadari Richmond should be back. My man Tay Davis should be back, who I love, of course. But Trey Jackson gone. Alexis Yetna gone. We figured that. Tyree Samuel gone. Femi Odakave surprisingly gone. I don't know what's happening here. I got to assume that it's an NIL issue and Seton Hall just doesn't have the money to attract guys. But the first year, Seton Hall with the new, transfers and just kind of like a new look under Shaheen Holloway, people were excited, but it's like, damn, they've just completely fallen off the face of the earth. And I thought Posh Alexander was a great fit to play under a guy like Holloway, but it seems like Posh may be going to Butler. Posh just tweeted earlier before I went on the air, the old, eye emoji thing. He was on a visit to Butler yesterday, and now he's tweeting out the the eyes emoji. So I don't know. Could mean something. Could just be bull. But Posh might be headed to Butler. But yeah, Seton Hall, man, they're in trouble. That's a team that has just a lot of work to do. Also, St. John's, man, like Rick Pitino. I can't doubt Rick Pitino, but what has he done? He's brought 3 guys from Iona, none of which were Walter Clayton, their best guy. Dennis Jenkins is a nice ad. Cruz Davis is a defensive young kid, I guess. Quinn Zielinski is going to give them some backup 4 minutes. Naheem Aline from the world champion UConn Huskies is going to be able to play some minutes and shoot some 3. Sean Conway, a 3-shooter from VNI. You bring back Joel Soriano and Drisa Traore. Soriano, the team's going to be built around Soriano. We know that. But what the hell? What is this roster? What is this roster that I'm looking at? They lose every player on the team. They basically, Patino just cleans house. They get rid of everyone except Soriano and Traore. They're currently looking at a lineup of Dennis Jenkins, Sean Conway, Naheem Aline, I guess Teresa Traore, and Joel Soriano, unless they're going to start Quinn Selinsky. I mean, Rick Pitino is one of the best coaches ever at the collegiate level, but what? I guess if that's the lineup they roll DFS wise, you just play Soriano and Jenkins every St. John slate because those guys are going to have usage rates of Marcus Howard level. And if you don't remember how Marcus Howard played like, he shot a million times a game and had a 40% usage rate. Like, that's legitimately going to happen. They are looking at Niagara's best player. And Rick Pitino had, coaching at Iona in the MAAC, the Metro. They got to play Niagara quite a few times, so he's familiar with them. But Noah Thomason, who would be a COVID senior, I believe, originally out of Houston Baptist, is visiting St. John's, and it sounds like they have a pretty good chance of adding him. He's another guy, three-point shooter, high usage, high shot rate guard. It seems like Pitino has a very specific plan around Soriano. They're going to feed the post a lot, but they're going to surround him with shooters. And if they add Thomas in, then we know that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to run an offense where Jenkins brings it up. He creates shots for himself, but also he's going to drive and kick to the three-point shooters, which at this point would be Conway and Aline. And if they add Thomas in, and then Soriano's going to be able to kick it out of the double teams. The 4 is going to be a wasted position because Teresa Traore doesn't really have an offensive game, and Quinn Selinsky is injured all the time. So the 4 will probably be a really light position for them, and they may just run Soriano and 4 guards. Like, I don't mind that, but there has to be some more work here. There has to be an impact name somewhere. Like, Pitino needs to splash a big name. Who is it going to be? Like, Primo Spears. That would be a huge name that Rick Pitino has to splash. He's not going to get Primo Spears, but that's the quality. That's the type of player that has to happen. I could even see Tanner Holden, who has hit the portal today from Ohio State, was really good at Wright State. Like, a player of Tanner Holden's impact that he had at Wright State was a great player. Didn't melt against upper tier competition, just never worked at Ohio State. Like, a name of his caliber is fine too. So we'll see what happens there with Rick Pitino. Circling back around here, Hunter Salas of Gonzaga, he transferred today, going to Wake Forest, going to play for Steve Forbes. Wake Forest has been a team that, under Forbes, while they haven't had success getting to the tournament, he has had very good success developing players. And we saw it 2 years ago at this point. Forbes comes over, really good, strong coach while he's at East Tennessee State. His last year there, he had a 30-4 record. Comes over to Wake. The first year was, not great. They go 6-16. Not really his guys, right? They were playing that was the roster that had Odi Oguama, Ishmael Massoud, Isaiah Mushis, Carter Witt, like a rough roster. Gets some of his guys in, works the transfer portal in year 2, turns Alondis Williams, a career role player for Oklahoma, into a conference player of the year in the ACC. Mind is completely blown from that. Turns Jake LaRavia into an NBA draftee. Gets the absolute most out of Dallas Walton, Kadeem C. Damari Monsanto is this guy at East Tennessee State, gets healthy, brings him along. He's starting to crush. Year 3, he brings over Tyree Appleby, who has mostly been a career role player, definitely showed flashes of being a leader at Florida, but he turns into a almost conference, player of the year caliber type talent. Bobby Klintman, who they land in the recruiting, has NBA lottery potential. Develop him another year. Andrew Carr, the transfer that they brought in there, out of Delaware, developing him, he's playing quite well. Cameron Hildreth in year 2 has developed into a borderline jack of all trades, almost stud at times. Matthew Marsh, a 7-footer, developing him. And then they brought over Jao Ituka from the portal from Marist, who was a really strong, great 3-point shooter, really good scorer overall, good driver as well. Didn't stay healthy at all this year, wasn't able to play. I expect him to take a leap, but the fact of the matter is, short sample, Forbes has been a hell of a developer, especially when he gets guards in the transfer portal. So expect Jao Ituka to take a step forward, but expect Hunter Salas, who was a top 25 recruit coming out, top 10, wasting away at Gonzaga, just never developing. Do not be surprised if Hunter Salas becomes a first or second team all ACC player under Forbes. Will Wake Forest win games? I think this is the year they make the tournament, especially if Klintman comes back. You're looking at a really strong group with Salas, Hildreth, Carr, Bobby Klintman, Mari Monsanto, if he can ever get healthy, and then, Jao Ituka and Matthew Marsh. Like, that's absolutely a tournament team there for Wake Forest. I really, really like this addition here, and I think Salas is going to be a big-time, high-level player. Dynasty, season-long, DFS. Buy stock now on Hunter Salas. I know that's, a really played-out thing to say, but I really mean that. They also added Kevin Miller, a guard out of Central Michigan. So they're bringing in, again, all these different guards. He's going to hit on one of them. If it's not going to be Salas, it's going to be Miller, or it's going to be Jao Ituka in year 2. Miller, who got hurt early. His first year in Central Michigan, he was a stud. He only played in 4 games this past season, had to sit out because of injury. They were playing him in those first couple of games 39 to 40 minutes, and he was scoring 18 plus points in each of them, taking a ton of shots, but he was actually quite efficient. 7 of 16, 5 of 11, 7 of 8, 5 of 9. He's headed to Wake Forest. Look out, because this Wake Forest team, they got the juice, man. They have an absolute solid roster, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Forbes is able to do with it. You bet, Tony. Yep. You guys, if you ever want to talk to Paul, man, I'm here for it. All right, so let's go into, we'll finish up the show here in the next 20, 30 minutes here, and let's talk about mid-majors, because I think there are some solid, and my man Clow in the Discord gave me a hard time because I was talking futures already, and I know it's very early for futures. There's still a lot going on. It's 6 to 7 months of the season, but why wait on a team that, if we think they're going to be good, why would we wait, get worse odds? If you've got a book that you're around, or you have access to DK or FanDuel, whichever sports betting, site book you use, if they're offering you futures now, why not take a peek and see if we can get a good number? Yes, a lot can happen. Guys get injured. Other portal things are happening. There are a ton of things, stuff to play out still. But come on, man, if we have a couple of teams that seem like they're in a great position and they're going to perform and possibly be the cream of the crop in their conference, why not take some shots, man, if you can find it? I will start out with the Governors of Austin Peay. I think they have done a really, really good job thus far. I like what I'm seeing with the team they're building here. Austin, they've gone through a coaching change. They lose, they were 9-22. So basically they come in, most of the roster at this point is gone. And they have to essentially start over. Corey Gibson is going to be their new head coach. He's actually the 14th head coach in history. It's kind of crazy when you say that, because wow, they've been around this long, only 14 head coaches, but you see other programs have been less. I think Corey Gibson is going to do quite well, though. He is an alumni. He played for Austin Peay way back in the early 2000s, so he's got a history here. He was an assistant coach for them for a few years, so he's definitely going to be able to take a program like Austin Peay that I think can definitely make some noise. And they're in a conference here in the ASUN that made a little bit of noise recently. And Darius McThree, they've been solid for a couple of years. Kennesaw State, they just had a really, really good season. Got Amir Abdur-Rahim a new job. They pushed Xavier as a 14 seed in the tournament. They beat, Liberty in the ACN tournament. Like Kennesaw State just had a really, really good year. This is a conference that is definitely not a doorstop. Like they're a stepping stone conference, yes, for players, but they're and coaches. Like Amir Abdur-Rahim, the Kennesaw State coach, just got hired at South Florida, but they're bringing in talent. And I want to harp on the fact, because people say, well, the portal is going to ruin low majors and mid majors. Oh my God, college basketball is coming to an end, doom and gloom. It's not. There are teams that are utilizing the portal in such a way that is benefiting them as well. We know that low major and mid major players who absolutely dominate, they're going to get plucked by the P5s. That's just the nature of the beast. That's how it's going to be. Once you come to terms with that, you can really start to move on with the rest of your life. However, those same programs that are losing their best player can go ahead and in turn take P5 cast-offs. And what I mean by that is high major players, they were great in high school. Maybe the opportunity wasn't there with the team that they joined. Whether that's minutes, development, whatever, fit not there. They in turn come from, a North Carolina, I'm just using an example, a Wisconsin, a UCLA, whatever P5 program they come to and join a low major or mid major, something like we saw Amane Bates do last year when he joined Eastern Michigan, and he had a great statistical year, even though Eastern Michigan didn't win any games. Seems like he might not be a winner. But he had a great statistical season. He's in the mix to get drafted, right? It gives you two options. If you hunt P5 castoffs, you immediately bring in a name. Your alumni and fans, you're able to use like, hey, we've just added this former Memphis player. Here's what we're going to build. Here's what we're going to do. You draw some excitement around the program. So your program and your coaching staff benefits in that regard. The player benefits because he's clearly going there to get more playing time, more usage, and more opportunity. Say he kills it. He absolutely crushes it. The P5 teams are going to come calling back. He's going to be able to thus transfer back up into it. Say he has just a good season. Maybe there's some offers here, but, they've got a good thing going. He could potentially stay. He can put up these monster numbers for 2 years, and then the draft comes calling, whether that's through the G League, gets drafted in the second round, does a G League, undrafted G League, goes overseas, pro level, whatever. But gone are the days of, I got to go to Kentucky, I got to go to Duke, I got to North Carolina. If I want to get drafted, I got to go to these programs. I got to go to the Blue Bloods. Those days are over. You can get drafted out of any school if you dominate. Look at Hendricks from UCF. UCF wasn't very good, but Hendricks, and his stats were solid. Taylor Hendricks, he put up some pretty good games. Statistically, he did average 15 and 7, which is solid for UCF, right? He could come back and average like 20 and 10 if he did, but he's not going to. He's going to be a borderline lotto pick. But he didn't have to go to Duke to have that happen, right? He's at UCF, a UCF team that really wasn't that good. They were okay, but definitely, at 19 and 15, that's a pretty disappointing year under Coach Johnny Dawkins. And considering they had, Ethiel Horton, Darius Johnson, CJ Kelly, Taylor Hendricks, like they had a solid roster, and they weren't able to win that many games, and they bowed out in the NIT. Got blown out by a very bad Oregon team. But the point is, you don't have to go to a blue blood or a high major to get drafted. And these guys that go to these low to mid majors can dominate, be the big man on campus, get some accolades, and then go to the draft. Or like I said, go back up to the P5 level. It's just a completely different ball game here with the portal being the way it is. We have the opportunity to see low major, mid major teams be more competitive. We just saw one of the most competitive tournaments in recent history. The parity was off the charts. We saw truly anyone could have beaten anyone. We saw that, we talked about it. If this was a year for the 16 to win again, this is it. It did happen. We saw 14s pushing, their 3 seeds. We saw upsets galore. We saw 1 seeds just getting taken out early. It was a phenomenal tournament, and you can expect this to happen for the next 2, possibly 3 seasons. Once the COVID year is gone, we might see this slow down. Portal, I think the first year transfer will still be in place, so we'll still see a little bit, but this is great news for us because low to mid majors are going to be able to work that portal and continue to build these relationships. And then ultimately a solid mix of recruiting and the transfer portal is going to be the way to go, right? But Austin P, I love what they've done. I think that Gibson has built a pretty solid group here. The one question mark is they brought in Desi Jones, who real strong scorer out of the MAAC for Quinnipiac. There are some legal troubles that have happened, so I don't know where that stands just yet. As of now, with Desi Jones, I love this roster. Gibson, let me pull it up real quick. So he came from Northwestern State. They went 22-11 in the Southland last year. They didn't qualify for the postseason. Whatever, they lost to Texas A&M CC, which is the team that got the automatic bid. But they had some pretty strong talent on their team. Guys like Jalen Hampton, Jamonte Black, Isaac Haney, DeMarcus Sharp. DeMarcus Sharp was actually probably a guy that could be a borderline P5 guy or like a Mountain West type player. Started his career at Missouri State. Really, really big numbers. Highest usage rate in the Southland, second highest shot rate, shot 54% from long range, but only 53 attempts, which is why he didn't qualify for the overall list. Third best steal rate in the conference, ninth best block rate, second best assist rate. This is a guy that at 6'3" is out there blocking shots, getting steals, doing everything possible. COVID senior, decides to follow his coach, Corey Gibson, to Austin P. I'm really excited about him. I think he's going to be really, really good for this Governor's program. So they bring Sharp over. They also bring Jamonte Black. Jamonte Black, makes up he's going to be a COVID senior as well, kind of makes up the backcourt there. He played a little bit of 2 and 3 there for him. But Black, high shot rate, shot about 38% from long range. One of the highest offensive ratings in the conference, one of the best free throw shooters in the conference. Jamonte Black, just a really good addition. Gibson was able to bring those two pieces with him, which I think was very, very important. Jalen Hampton, who was only a freshman last season for Northwestern State. He has a lot of growth and development to do. He doesn't shoot threes yet, but he's a wing, very strong rebounder, draws a lot of fouls. Just a guy that they can work with. So bringing over his freshman with him there, that was a good move as well. They also bring Jordan Wilmore, who was a Missouri transfer at one point, played for Northwestern State last year. So another guy Gibson decides to bring over. Wilmore was more of a role player type. He did suffer some injuries and was banged up quite a bit. So he didn't really get full minutes, but a very strong rebounder throughout the course of his career. The short amount of minutes he played for Missouri, he was always a good shot blocker and rebounder, and that's what he offers here. So they bring him over with them from Northwestern State as well. And Isaac Haney, almost forgot. So they legitimately bring a starting 5 from Northwestern State. Isaac Haney will be a junior, shot about 32% from long range. Good usage rate, over 20%. A solid defender on ball, almost a 3% steal rate. They're a smaller team because of these guys, and the Haney came over from Missouri State as well. But they definitely have talent, and at the ASUN level, I think these guys can all play. And the nice thing about Haney is he was playing like 38 minutes a game. A guy that doesn't have to statistically impact the game, but just ball control and giving them good, solid defensive minutes. Won't be a big fantasy guy whenever we have Austin P on the slate, but he's definitely a guy that you want on the floor because he's going to control things and be able to keep the team from panicking. But the fact of the matter is they bring over a legitimate starting 5 from Northwestern State. Greedy Williams is the only guy I think that didn't come with them. Let me double check that. And he was a starter. So they bring those 5 with them. They bring in Desi Jones, like I said, one of the best players on Quinnipiac. And suddenly this roster that has lost most of the players from a underwhelming team reloads and has the continuity under Coach Gibson to really make some noise in the ASUN. So I'm a fan of Austin Peay. If you can find a future or just keep them in their mind, because a lot of people will be looking back to Liberty or Kennesaw, which I think Kennesaw will probably ultimately take a step back. Not only do they lose their coach, but several of the key players hit the portal. I think Austin Peay is a very good futures bet if you can get a book to give you the ASUN future. They're not up in reputable books just yet, but that is a team I want you to put in your scopes and be thinking about because they're very, very good, and I'm excited to see what happens with them. The next low major, mid-major team I want to talk about is McNeese State. Will Wade, the American gangster, does his thing at LSU, gets caught on tape talking about we're making strong ass offers. Everybody's paying recruits even before NIL. Will Wade was just dumb enough to really, talk about it and get caught slipping with the recording. So LSU cans him. He was solid. He brought LSU quite a bit of exposure. The basketball program, normally a football-esque program, right? But under Will Wade, they were definitely a winning club. You look at what he did, his first year at LSU, 18-15, whatever, but then 28-7, 21-10, 19-10, 22-12. And I know those aren't the best numbers, but he's well over 500. He's making the tournament. When he was at VCU for a couple of seasons, he won 25-11 and 26-9. When he was at Chattanooga, he won 18-15, 22-10. The guy wins. Say what you will about Will Wade. He wins wherever he goes. That is a fact. He's a winner. They were an 8 seed, a couple of years ago, beat St. Bonaventure before losing to Michigan. They were just a really solid group. That was the Cam Thomas team. And the fact that they were an 8 seed, they were a very dangerous 8 seed. They were a 6 seed the year after that. They lost to Iowa State, of course. In 2020, obviously there was no tournament because of the COVID season. You look at 2019 when he took over, they were a 3 seed, wins over Yale and Maryland before losing to Michigan State. That was the team with Nas Reed, Tremont Waters, Javonte Smart, Skylar Mays, Emmett Williams. That was such a fun team for DFS and just to watch in general. And then his first season there in 2018, they make the NIT. They win a game as a 3 seed before losing to Utah. That was a team, again, with Skylar Mays, Tremont Waters, but they had that experience. Aaron Epps as well. Just had talent everywhere he goes. The VCU squad that went 26-9, they were a 10 seed, lost to St. Mary's, but they had Jaquan Lewis. They had Samir Dowdy, you guys might know that name, ended up playing for Auburn, the Final Four Auburn iteration after playing for VCU. The guy has a knack for finding talent. The guy has a knack for winning games, and he has a knack for taking whatever team he has to the postseason, whether that's the NCAA tournament or the NIT. Both years at VCU, he went to the NCAA tournament as a 10 seed back in, 2016. They won their first round game against Oregon State before eventually bowing out. At Chattanooga, where he got his start for this in the Southern Conference, they did not make the postseason, but he won enough games and turned that Chattanooga program into a winner record-wise. And they did in his first year make a postseason. I think it was the CIT. They didn't win a game there. So Will Wade's a winner. That is what I'm getting at. He's taking over a McNeese State program that absolutely was atrocious under John Aiken last year, 11-23. The Southland had a lot of bad teams in it, but this is a squad with the roster he's assembled that can absolutely dominate. Absolutely dominate. I'm looking at the rest of the Southland teams, and I'm wondering how they're going to handle this. You get a coach like Will Wade, and you got to know that Will Wade's probably staying at McNeese for 2 years, right? He's depending on what they do this year. Like if they make the tournament and win a game, he's probably taking the first P5 job that comes along. But they make the tournament and lose, he'll probably stay for another year, make the tournament again, and see what they can do. He's brought in some firepower from a player personnel standpoint. Shahada Wells, who I love. I've been a Hada Wells fan for a couple of years now. Hada was a scoring machine whenever he got an opportunity, when they had injuries to Mike Miles. Hada came in there and absolutely dominated and put up some good scores. Didn't play a lot his first year with TCU. Now he tore up the JUCO level, and then his only season at UT Arlington before he came to TCU, he was an absolute scoring machine. Shot 40% from long range, put up some big numbers. I mean, he was putting up 20, 30 real points each and every game, taking a ton of shots, and got himself to the foul line, a metric F ton. So he's a really good play. Comes to McNeese State with the idea that he's probably going to play some combo guard for them, be a scorer, but also initiate the offense. They also bring in Mike Saunders, who spent time since in Utah. Let's double check here. I think he might have to get a waiver. I'm not sure he's a grad, but let's double check that. I assume he's going to play right away, though, or else they wouldn't have done it. So he'll be a COVID senior, which I think technically gives him no waiver, but we'll see. But Cincinnati, he was a role player, a little bit more of a role for Utah off the bench. Didn't play as many games, 18, but he had a really high shot rate, a very high usage rate. He was very impactful when they gave him minutes. Towards the end of the year, he played a little bit against UCLA, 24 minutes, scored 25 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 10 of 17 from the field, hit 3 threes. It was a wonder they didn't give him more minutes, because when he was out there, he definitely was impressive. And again, he had a high usage rate. So expect him to get the ball a lot and contribute a ton to this McNeese State program. They also go out and get Zach Harvey to play a little 2-3 for him, another former Cincinnati transfer from a couple of years ago. He was also at UC Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara is a team that also works. I'll talk about them in a second as well. Quite being players who are cast-offs. They had Andre Kelly on their team this past year, Josh Pierre-Louis, Miles Norris. They do a great job of working the portal too. So you get a guy with that P5 experience in Zach Harvey. I think he has an opportunity to be really, really good for them as well. Javon, who was a former JUCO kid, he just came out of the JUCO level. He spent time with UMass, so he has experience playing in the A10. He's going to be a big factor. CJ Felder is going to get his opportunity. After Felder looked so good for Boston College, like he honestly, to me and a lot of people out there, your star. Doesn't play a lot. There's injuries, there's issues, whatever. He just didn't look like the same type of player. Now he gets to go to a more low pressure situation for McNeese State, where he can go back to just playing basketball and doesn't have to be in his head so much. And I think he's going to play. I think he's going to play the 4 for them, but he might play some small ball 5 even, because right now the team or the roster that they have, it's a little small. I think he's going to play fast. I think that they're going to be a really team, and I think Felder could put up some big stats here as a small ball 4-5. They also bring in a transfer from UTSA in DJ Richards, so another guy that has experience playing against teams, out of the UTSA out of the CUSA, and played against non-con opponents such as Utah, New Mexico. Then he goes and plays North Texas, Rice, Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, teams like that were quite good. Richards, as a freshman, playing next to Japhet Medor and Jay Germany, both really good players for the Roadrunners. Richards came out as a freshman, 20% usage rate, 25% shot rate, shot about 34% from long range. He's definitely going to be an asset for this team. Probably play some 3 on the wing there at 6'5", but again, a little bit small. But he played over 30 minutes per game for UTSA once he became a starter in late November. So the pieces that McNeese has brought in they're intriguing. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm digging deep here, guys, but I'm looking for some futures in the ASUN, in the ASUN and in the Southland, because I'm really excited about this McNeese State team. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that under Wade, they're going to win 20-plus games. I think they're going to dance, and I think they're going to win their conference handily. I would be shocked if this team wasn't a major major winning squad, 20 plus wins in this conference. Texas A&M CC, they're going to take a step back. They, lose Tennyson. They have a Lamar program that's generally decent, a Incarnate Word program that's not. Northwestern State is generally decent, but they lost Gibson and their whole team was gutted. Texas A&M CC with, Tennyson, Trey Tennyson, who has transferred, obviously going to TCU. They lose primary playmakers and scorers. They're going to take a step back. They're going to have to reload a little bit, and they've been hitting the JUCO level, so no shame in that, but teams filled out by a bunch of JUCO guys. I think this is absolutely smart money to prepare yourself to make a bet on McNeese State, because they're not done yet under Will Wade, and their roster is like borderline. The roster they have right now could compete in the Mountain West, could compete in the CUSA, could compete in the AAC, could probably compete in the Pac-12, and they're playing in the Southland. Come on, guys. So that's one deep dive there to pay attention to and really, be involved with, because they're going to be good. Bumping it up a little bit, I like Boise State's chances. Mountain West. I know it's extremely early. This is the one that people gave me a little bit of a hard time. Like, well, why make a future? Why be talking about Boise State? There's going to be so much happening in the Mountain West, and I think the Mountain West is going to be very improved this year. It was a down year, even though they had some good representation in the tournament. Overall, it was a pretty weak conference at the bottom. David Roddy leaving Colorado State for the NBA, that was a tough hit for them. Fresno State was no good. Nevada was no good. San Jose was improved under Miles. Got to give it credit to them. Utah State, solid. Wyoming injuries, they couldn't do anything. UNLV started hot, finished horribly. Air Force was a non-factor. Obviously, the Aztec were a big factor. New Mexico faded late after being one of the few undefeated teams left. In the late November, early December. And Boise State, they went through ups and downs. But they're going to be really good. They lose Shaver, big shot Shaver. They're bringing in pieces, though, that are going to make them an instant factor. I've talked a little bit about him already, but you're going to have to get to know the name Roddy Anderson, because he's going to be a guy that whenever Boise State is on the slate, or whenever the Mountain West, whenever we're talking about the Mountain West, I'm going to be all about Roddy Anderson. He is a phenomenal point guard and an absolute future star in this league, in the collegiate level as well. One of only three, I've brought up the stat several times, you'll know it by heart, bring it up one more time. One of three freshmen, only three freshmen, to average 13 points, at least 13 points per game, at least 3.5 rebounds per game, and at least 3.5 assists per game. Now, that may not sound like a lot, especially if you're looking at, NBA stat lines or big time stars and stuff. Maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but you will be hard pressed to find another freshman averaging at least 3.5 rebounds or assists and 13 plus points. You just won't find them. Key George of Baylor, Roddy Anderson at UC San Diego, a big one. I am enamored with the way this kid plays. He is so good. He is going to be such a big time star for this Boise State team. Like, you can definitely take that one to the bank. I'm backing him big time, and I am not worried about that prediction failing, because he's going to be really good. And then the third player to average those numbers is Andrew Rode, who decides to he's actually transferring to Virginia, who we'll talk about them a little bit next week. Ace Thomas, transfer, really strong player. He's going to be good at Virginia. So just three guys. Love Roddy Anderson. He's going to play 35 plus minutes a game. He's going to have the ball in his hands often. I am all over him in Dynasty. I'm all over him in season long. And I don't think people are really going to understand just how good he's going to be. I think we can get him, in these various leagues, if you're starting to mess with season long stuff, very easily. And for DFS purposes, he's going to come into it so cheap, so very cheap. I'm all over him. They also bring in Cam Martin, who was a JUCO star at one point, started his career at Jacksonville State, stars at Missouri Southern. He's been playing college basketball for over 5 years now, so gets the super COVID senior treatment, goes to Kansas, doesn't get the minutes, didn't work out at Kansas, unfortunately, but it will work out at Boise State. He can play a little 3, he can play a little 4. He's going to be really good for this Boise State program. I think people are going to see just how good he can be. He just didn't get used right at Kansas. And no questioning Bill Self. There was just no room for Cam Martin. And then they bring on Omar Stanley, who is the St. John's transfer, a really physical, low rebound. Offensively, there's a lot to be desired there, but I think they'll put him in a good position to compete. Bringing in those 3 guys, I think, has been really underrated, and I think it's enough for Boise State to be a Mountain West contender. And they're not done yet either. There'll be some additional, people that they add. There'll be some guys that decide to return. We'll see what happens. They've got some freshmen coming in, a point guard and Chris Lockett. They've got a wing coming in by the name of Andrew Meadow. They do have a post player committed, hasn't signed yet, and Emmanuel Ugbo. They've got some bodies coming in, but I really, really feel good about this trio in the portal coming in, and Stanley, Martin, and Rodney Anderson. So Boise State to win the Mountain West is one that I'll be looking to do as well. Now, if there is a reason Boise State doesn't win the MWC, it will be because of UNLV, not because of SDSU, possibly New Mexico, which I'll talk about too. We'll just tie this into the Mountain West, and then we'll get out of here. UNLV has made a quick splash. Seemingly all in the same day. They bring on the Boone brothers, Caleb and Keelan. Keelan had a fantastic season for Pacific this last season. His brother Caleb stayed on at Oklahoma State, showed flashes. Fouls always a problem with him, but the Boones reunited after spending time together at Oklahoma State. Keelan goes to Pacific to do his thing, and now they're going to reunite for a UNLV team, and they're going to be really good together in that league. Keelan has turned himself into a really phenomenal athletic, scoring, rebounding wing, and Caleb has turned himself into a legitimate low post scoring threat that can rebound as good as anyone in the country if he can control his fouls. They also bring in Jalen Hill of Oklahoma, who is better suited as a role player, but he can definitely hit shots. He can be a usage guy. He can't do it every game, but he can do it, periodically. And I think he's definitely a plus for this team. So those are the 3 guys they seemingly brought on all in the same day. Shane Noel will take another step. The Arizona transfer. It's a Seattle kid. I know him well. I feel pretty good about UNLV. I like Boise State's spot better, but if they don't win, it would be because of UNLV in my mind, not SDSU. You made some moves here. They have brought in Jamarl Baker, who surprisingly somehow still has eligibility, played for Kentucky in 2017, Arizona in 2019, Fresno State the last couple of years. Now he's going to New Mexico as a grad transfer super senior. So they bring on a very experienced guy there. Nelly Jr. Joseph comes in from Iona, played for Coach Pitino there at Iona. Now he comes to New Mexico here and plays for the other Pitino, the son of Ricky, and will do well for this New Mexico team. New Mexico loses a lot of pieces, right? They're, Morris Udezi may be gone. They do bring back Jalen House. They do bring back Jamal Mashburn. They do bring back, I believe, Donovan Dent. So, the guard play is going to be strong. They'll use Jamarl Baker to supplement. Then they bring in Nelly Jr. Joseph, who is going to be just a phenomenal low post threat in the Mountain West. And then Mustafa Amzil, who comes in from Dayton. Amzil looked like a guy who was going to be a really strong, first or second team conference, player at the A10 level. Dayton brought in some other talent. Teron Holmes usurped him, and Amzo just kind of fell by the wayside. Now he gets a chance to start fresh here for New Mexico, where I think he can actually play pretty well, and his defense is good enough to where he can see plenty of minutes under Pitino. So New Mexico definitely has the chops to win the Mountain West as well, and they're going to be a team that is upper echelon in this conference. Utah State loses Odom. He takes several guys to VCU with him. They are going to be in a semi-rebuilding mode. They do bring in Nigel Burris, who is a post player, an Idaho transfer, physical guy, definitely somebody who can play, but they have a ton of holes. Losing, Max Shulga to VCU, like we talked about. They lose Stephen Ashworth, who is headed for Creighton. That's big news in the replacement for Nemhard. They are looking pretty rough. Sean Barstow heads to VCU. So Utah State's only been competitive the last 5-6 years, meaning like they're going to be very good at all. Air Force loses Jake Heidbetter to Clemson. That's a big loss for them. They have other pieces and quite a bit of freshmen coming in, so we'll see what happens there. But there's always a lot of turnover with those military schools. Not a big fan of Air Force there without Heidbetter. Colorado State, they'll be moving on without some key pieces. They bring a New Mexico transfer by the name of Vontae Johnson. He was a role player there, but I think he'll be quite good. And Nick Clifford, who transfers over from Colorado. Good piece to have. They do bring back Taviante Jackson, who is the heir apparent, as far as I'm concerned, is the heir apparent to Isaiah Stevens. So we'll see what happens there. They do lose Johnny Tanya, who decides to transfer to Missouri. That'll be interesting. We'll talk more about that on the SEC show. But there's still quite a bit of holes here in that Colorado State lineup. And I don't think they're going to be, that much improved from last year, if at all. Fresno State, they were quite bad. They bring on Wyoming transfer Xavier Dussel. They bring in a transfer by the name of Michael Robinson, and they bring on Enoch Bokwai, who is an ASU Arizona State transfer. So Fresno State's still got work to do. They have been very good since Orlando Robinson went pro. Isaiah Moore didn't really work out, and they don't have much in the cupboard right now. So another team that Boise State's going to be better than. And then you have Nevada, who, loses quite a bit. Will Baker, heads off to LSU. So missing out on him is going to be tough. They also lose the freshman Trey Pettigrew, who was expected to be a key piece for them for a long time. He transfers over to Bradley. Things just didn't work out quite for him. Jared Lucas taking all those shots. They do have, freshmen coming in. Nothing too exciting. They have a center by the name of Jariah Coleman coming in from the JUCO level that showed flashes, but this is another truly barren roster that doesn't look that great depending on who returns from the upperclassmen. And they do have a couple of guys that are with veteran experience, but it's not a roster that I'm looking to produce very well. And then, of course, San Diego State, they bring in Reese Dixon Waters from USC. That's the first order of business. We'll see who ends up staying. The rest, between Lamont Butler, who is testing the NBA draft, but I do expect him to come back. Darian Trimmel. I believe Matt Bradley is out of eligibility. They do get Micah Parrish back, and they do have a freshman that they have signed as of now too. They're always going to be competitive, but their roster, it's not that scary on paper, but they tend to always be not scary on paper, and they play a lot better than they look. And then lastly, San Jose State under Coach Miles. They had the absolute juice with Amari Moore. He's going pro. We won't have him anymore. They have Myron Amy, Alvaro Cardenas. Those are the key pieces that are returning. They do have a JUCO bid coming in. There is a couple freshmen coming in. So no real great names just yet. I expect they may hit the portal as well, but this is clearly another team that is below Boise State. So out of all these teams, UNLV and New Mexico have what I consider to be rosters on par with Boise State. San Diego State, just because they're San Diego State, and then a bunch of low-level rosters. So that is why I'm in on Boise State, because of the pieces they brought in, because of the conference they play in, and where I think they sit in terms of pecking order is quite high. Very, very high on this State club. I think they're going to do quite well. All right, that is going to wrap it up. That is just a little bit of what's been going on. I'll quickly go through the that happened today or the last couple of days. Arizona State's lost a ton. Warren Washington hits the portal from Arizona State. DeJuan Clayton hits the portal from Cal. They've had major turnover. They did bring in Jalen Cone and Fardaz Amac, though, so we'll see under Mark Madsen. Puff Johnson, of course, goes to Penn State. Mentioned that one. My man Severe Wheeler coming to the Huskies. Now, Ray J. Dennis, who played for Boise State at one time, is a grad transfer leaving Toledo. There was a story/talk about Coach Underwood at Illinois. There was a point guard coming in, some possible tampering happening. Ray J. Dennis hits the portal today as a grad transfer, and not even 45 minutes later, he gets a crystal ball on multiple sites to Illinois. So clearly that was the guard that people were talking about that Illinois was after, and tampering. It's a funny joke, but I mean, it clearly happens. But that's just a blatant case of they were definitely talking to this kid beforehand, and he's headed to Illinois, it sounds like. So that's that. Tanner Holden of Ohio State going to the portal. I'd like to see him go back to the mid-major level, or at least like Tanner Holden. If he went to St. John's, I'd be good with it, or even DePaul. Like, he's a scoring machine. I don't know what happened at Ohio State. It just was a bad fit, I guess, but he's a scorer. Wright State guys performed well against upper-tier competition, so it makes no sense for Holden not to play well, and I think he can contribute wherever he goes. Cyril Martinov, a Georgia Tech transfer, heads to Eastern Michigan, and Hunter Salas, we mentioned, to Wake Forest. And then Raekwon Battle, kid that just north of me, North Seattle, I watched in high school a bunch, loved him at Washington, loved him at Montana State. Rothstein put out a false list saying that Washington was in the mix to get him back. I bit on that and had my heart ripped out. So Ray Battle is headed to West Virginia. So while we have that Kentucky to Washington pipeline alive and well, the Washington to West Virginia pipeline is also alive and well, and it needs to stop. Eric Stevenson went to West Virginia. Emmett Matthews, who left West Virginia to come to Washington, to go back to West Virginia. And now Ray Battle, who was a Husky for 2 years, then on Montana State for a couple of years. Now he's going to play for West Virginia. Quick note about West Virginia. They probably have won the portal to this point. I think a lot of people would say Arkansas has won the portal. I think clearly at this point, West Virginia with Huggy Bear, they've brought in Kerr Kriisa to play point. I was a big Kriisa fan his freshman year. Not such a big fan of him now. I'm curious to see, because if he doesn't defend at a high level, he will get benched. We know Hugs. He does crazy stuff. People are going to be loving West Virginia. They're going to be all over him. And then in DFS and fantasy and stuff like that, they're going to get their hearts ripped out, because we know these guys will get benched if they don't play good defenses, bottom line. And I'm not sure Kriisa's defense or Raekwon Battle's defense is going to be a par all the time. But they bring in Kerr Kriisa, they bring in Ray Battle, they bring in Omar Silverio from Manhattan, who's actually really quite good when he was there. Somebody that I think will be a pretty big factor. Overall, Jose Perez, also coming over from Manhattan, will be a big factor. They were trying to get him enrolled here, but couldn't. He spent time at Gardner-Webb, spent time at Marquette, Manhattan, and now he's going to West Virginia. He's a very good scorer, somebody that will factor in. Omar Silverio spent time with Hofstra, Rhode Island, and Manhattan, coming over to West Virginia. So apparently the Manhattan to West Virginia pipeline is open as well. But those are the pieces they bring in. And then, of course, Jesse Edwards to play center for them out of Syracuse. They say they bring back, Trey Mitchell or this West Virginia roster is suddenly looking scary as hell. If they have a lineup of Kriisa, we'll say Jose Perez, Ray Battle, Jesse Edwards, Mo Wag or Trey Mitchell, like, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. And Kobe Johnson's still around too, right? I like Kobe Johnson. I think he's really good. Like, shit, man, this West Virginia roster suddenly looks really, really good. All right, let's pull up the rest of the list here, and then we'll head out. Deshaun Jackson of Washington State, they misused him. He was injured, but he's heading to Charlotte. Charlotte really not doing much in the portal, but they do get Deshaun Jackson, who I think has a chance to be quite good for them. Trey Thomas, a Vanderbilt transfer, heading to Bowling Green. Vanderbilt has been another loser in the portal. Brandon Newman of Purdue heading to Western Kentucky. So that's a pretty interesting move there for him. I think he can do well. Jacob Groves of Oklahoma heads to Virginia. Virginia has done really well. They're a winner in the portal. DJ Davis leaving UC Irvine to go to Butler gives Butler a scorer that they desperately need. Their roster is really, really looking tough. Robbie Barron of Northwestern transfers to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is another team that looks to have won in the portal thus far. And then a Parker Braun of Santa Clara hits the portal. Cam Hayes of LSU goes to East Carolina. And Georgia Tech, under Damon Stoudemire, has already basically won the portal for ACC teams, bringing in Ole Miss freshman Emory Abram, who has stratospheric upside. Kwesi Reeves, a scorer from Florida. Deshaun Cloud, a upperclassman coming out of Western Carolina, a high-usage forward that's going to definitely contribute immediately. And then Ebenezer Duana, the offensively challenged center from really, really good shot blocker, rim protector, and rebounder. Suddenly, this Georgia Tech team looks pretty solid. Say they bring back Lance Terry, Miles Kelly, who is in the draft, but we'll see. Dallin Coleman, Jelon Moore. This team is pretty fun. They also bring in a UMass freshman by the name of Tafara Gapare. This roster is looking like it might do some damage, and the ACC is prime for a team like Georgia Tech to rip and run here. And as long as Pastner's not around, and he's not, the sky is truly the limit for this Georgia Tech team. So I had to talk about them. ACC has really been active. Real quick, Virginia ultimately might be the winner of the portal. Why do I say that? They have brought in some really big talent, really strong, competitive roster brewing. The Virginia offense is best when they have their 2 to 3 3-point shooters. They've got a big who kind of knows his role, right? And they can just run through those 3 scorers. They are building a roster that's starting to look like the championship level team. Dante Harris is coming in. We knew that last year. He transferred. He had to sit out there coming over from Georgetown. He has a tremendous amount of talent. Kihei Clark is finally out of eligibility, gone. Dante Harris comes in, going to run the point. Andrew Rode comes in. He's going to be some combo guard. He can also run the point. He is he's going to be really good. Don't think just because he played at St. Thomas that he won't be good. He is going to be a phenomenal player, and don't be shocked if he makes first or second team all conference in the ACC in his first year there. Bringing in Jacob Groves to play some 3-4 for them. He's a tough kid, offensively not going to have to do a whole lot, but he can. And then Jordan Minor, who I'm absolutely enamored with, upperclassman coming out of the Merrimack. Merrimack, really strong program, not eligible for the postseason, but they ran through their conference. Jordan Minor is going to play some 4, maybe even small ball 5. They don't really have a center after Francisco Cafaro decided to transfer out of there. Not like he played a bunch anyways. He's going to Santa Clara. And then, of course, Caden Shedrick, who was rumored to go to Indiana for a long time, decides to transfer to Texas. So Virginia doesn't have the biggest roster. Isaac Trout is also gone, who's decided to go to, I believe, Creighton. So they lose a bunch of their front court, but they do get Jordan Minor, who looks very, very good. Again, Jacob Groves, who can handle himself, Andrew Rode, and Dante Harris. Coming back, Isaac McNeely, who I think is going to be able to shoot the lights out. They've invested a lot of time in his shot form, and they're going to make him a guy that fits in the system. Ryan Dunn, who seemed like a jack-of-all-trades player last year, and is going to further develop. Tane Murray, who has some further development stuff going on. And suddenly this Virginia roster is looking really, really good. Where they stand with Jaden Gardner, there's a few guys where, let's see, like, I don't know, eligibility wise, I think Gardner technically, no, I think he's out of eligibility actually. I don't think he has any more. So I was going to say otherwise, yeah, him and Vanderplas coming back would be nuts. But yeah, this Virginia roster, this is a roster that can do some damage. So I'll spend a lot of time next week talking about the ACC because all of their teams have gone through some major changes, and I think it's going to be a more competitive roster. And I'm really excited about the direction they're headed there. So that's my early winner for the portal is the Virginia Cavaliers. A lot to talk about, though. Appreciate it, everyone who continues to support the show. We will be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, talking about the transfer portal and any other college basketball news that we need to talk about. Focus next week on the ACC. Content-wise, the rest of this week, on Friday, there will be a USFL Top Plays article, and in just a few short weeks, we'll have daily WNBA content. Get over to ftndaily.com. Get over to ftnbets.com. A lot of good stuff. A lot of people winning money on the various sports on those sites. Use code DUB for your 20% off discount. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of the world-famous CBB Super Show. See y'all.